One of the scenes that I find most fascinating from a television show slash movie, I think it was probably the big box office portion of Transformers, that I found one of the most fascinating scenes. A lot of people kind of miss the real point of it. And that was when the Transformer guy had the watch. The watch that the multi-millionaire, the boss of the hot girlfriend, he had the watch on his arm, and he grabbed the kid's arm, and the watch left his arm and went on the other guy's arm. And he told him, he said, through this watch, we can control your biometrics. We know what your heart rate is. We'll know if you're lying or not. We can put the pressure on, and the watch would squeeze him, and he'd fall on the ground in pain. And the watch was a device used to control the kid's behavior, but there was more to it than that. In fact, the reason the man put the watch on his arm was different than just control. In fact, it had a purpose that every leader needs to understand is a critical function of your leadership. This watch in Transformer had this same critical function that you need to have in your leadership. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. One of the things that fascinates me about leadership is the amount of time that we find ourselves struggling for information. We want to read the books, we want to go to the meetings, we want to go to the seminars, and if we're not careful, we become seminar junkies looking for information. And yet the information that we seek, sometimes we don't find where we would think we would find it. And maybe the information we find is not as relevant as we would want it to be. But the watch for the Transformer, that device was more than a control device. Of course, it could inflict the pain, but before it could inflict the pain, it had to know something. It had to know that the wearer of the watch was either in a place they weren't supposed to be, or having a conversation they weren't supposed to be, or saying or doing something they weren't supposed to be, and then the pain would be inflicted. There was a supervision factor, an inside knowledge factor, a spy factor. Before the behavior was modified, the behavior was monitored. Now, you may not remember, but a few years back, there was a big brouhaha about a certain software application that's been on many devices around the world, and many millennials, especially in the United States, still use this particular software device or app known as TikTok. And what a lot of people don't realize is just how much information that can gather. Now let me set that aside for a minute and take you back to my days in marketing. For 10 years, I worked at Verizon in the field of inside sales and telesales, and also in marketing. And in marketing, we used to use this resource called Axiom. Axiom is a database. Axiom is the database that sits behind that little shopping cart that you bleep, or when you go to 7-Eleven and you type in your phone number to save money on your gas or to get points towards your coffee. Yeah, it's the database that tracks all that. So imagine if one database could track when you bought coffee, where you bought coffee, what time you bought coffee, how much coffee you bought, how many Red Bulls you bought at the same stop, how many times you put gas in your car, where you put gas in your car, how much gas you put in your car. What if it could also track whether you bought razor blades or pregnancy tests, socks or t-shirts, cans of dog food or a ribeye steak? Well, it does. That's exactly what it does. Every time you swipe your credit card, it links your credit card with your grocery store purchases, with your gas purchases, with everything else. And so it's really easy to create what we would call a consumer profile. A consumer profile gives me a really good idea about the geography that you live in, how far you drive every day, how many different points of contact you might make. At lunch, you were at this restaurant. At breakfast, you were at that restaurant. At dinner, you were at that restaurant. And you got gas 3 times in the meantime. You do a lot of driving around in a certain geographic area based simply on your credit card purchases. That's a lot of data. But if I could add that data to who your friends are, who you hang out with, Where are you every Saturday evening or every Sunday morning? Who is it that you're nearby? Because see, I noticed that my device, my little handheld pocket tracker, has started notifying me when I'm near other people that I know that I'm connected with on various forms of social media. And a little thing pops up on my device and says, hey, your friend so-and-so is also nearby. You should reach out to him and let him know you're in the area. So it's not just tracking me, it's tracking me in relationship to other people that I know. And there's a possibility you were in a place where something went down, that because people you know were in a place where something went down, they suspect that something went down between you. You follow me? Because your phone is, and the app is, and the app is asking you, what are these things that you do? What books do you like? What movies do you read? What is your consumer profile? See, that's the same thing the watch did in Transformers. Where are you going? Who are you talking to? Who are you hanging out with? Who are you around? What kind of conversations are you having? Have you had a conversation? I bet you have. Have you had a conversation where maybe you're talking about Uber Eats or DoorDash, and maybe you're a little hungry, and then 5 minutes later you open your social media app and boom, there's an ad for, guess what? DoorDash, Uber Eats. Imagine that. How does that happen? I know the phone's not listening. It doesn't do that. That would be invasion of privacy. But maybe just maybe they had this premonition that it's about dinner time, and maybe we should. Yeah, no. See, I think like the watch in Transformers, that tool to control is using insider information. It's listening. It's listening, and it's paying attention, and it's cross-referencing who you're with and where you went and what you did and how long you were there and how much money you spent on what. And all that data is being kept on you so that they, whoever they is, can sell that information. Whether that's a social media company or that's a data company that mines data like Axiom, or that's just some advertiser who wants to know whether or not you're ready to buy a new pair of socks because they can look back at the data and know how long it's been since you bought socks or a washing machine. Maybe it's as harmless as that. And maybe not. But see, leaders know the power of inside information. Let me take you back a couple thousand years, maybe 3,000. I'd have to look at the book just to know for sure. But there was once a king, and he had this guy that worked for him. And this guy would come in and sit in his little chambers in the palace and have conversations with him. And from time to time, this guy that was talking to the king would say, hey, listen, so I have this little bit of information you might want to know, and that is this neighboring king, these guys from Assyria, they're going to attack on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I'm just saying. But here, if it was me, and it's not me, but if it was me, I would send my troops to the west out into the woods and tell them just hang out there until these guys come knocking on the door, and then when they do, you've got them flanked, and you can come in from behind and wipe them all out, and they'll be dead. If I were handling it, I'm not, you're the king, but if I were handling it, that's how I would do it. And after 3 or 4 of these little excursions like this, the king of Assyria went, how is this happening? How is it possible that every time we show up, somebody knows we must have a mole in our camp, somebody needs to find them and get rid of them? And after it kept happening, he said, you know what, I think that king has a little bird that sits in his chambers and tells him secrets that he's not supposed to know. And I don't know who that little bird is. Maybe he had a Transformers watch. Maybe he was listening on the other king while he was making his plans. Maybe his social media apps were tracking him everywhere he went. Just maybe. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was something way beyond your ability to comprehend right now or even your ability to accept. But remember this, we are physical beings living in a spiritual world, and there are things going on this very second that you cannot see or perceive. Oh, but they're watching you. And they're listening to every word coming out of your mouth. And they're cross-referencing everybody that you hang out with and every book that you read and everything that you do and everything that you say. And they know. And they're keeping track of it. Now, here's one thing that you need to know. There's one side of that spiritual battle that can see the future. Already has it all written out. The other side doesn't have a clue. So the only thing they can do is track the data and build patterns. Armies have been doing it for years, decades, centuries, millennia. Armies have been tracking the movements of their opponent to figure out a pattern to plan their attack. Happens on a regular basis. The movement of people, the migration of societies, the movement of voting blocks and power blocks and money. Where do the rich people go? Where do the poor people go? Where do the smart people go? Where do the uneducated go? Where do the laborers live? Where do the elite live? What part of town, city, state, country, nation, world do they migrate to? Where do you find them? Are the people in Morocco different than the people in Michigan? Why? What makes them different? See, this is all insider information that leaders pay attention to. They listen closely for the things that people say that they don't intentionally reveal their deepest, darkest secrets, but leaders know how to hear them. Leaders pay attention to the stories that people tell, because those stories will reveal more than you would ever tell on purpose. Leaders pay close attention because leaders know that the most powerful information is inside information. And oftentimes, that's not the information you intended to give away. If you're a leader and you're not paying close attention, intently aware, astutely aware of all the conversation going on around you by your competitors, by your teammates, by your employees, chances are you're going to miss something really, really important. But if you're a strong leader, one of the things you're paying really close attention to are the conversations that don't seem to matter, because that's where the insider information comes from. I challenge you as a leader to open the horizons of your attention, to listen intentionally to things that people don't realize they're telling you, because they're giving you a lot more data than you know. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.